Hi, my name's Dr. Catherine Hughes from Crime Psych. I'm a criminal psychologist and I run a business that enables me to bring knowledge and learning to everybody, not just those who are studying at universities or colleges. And I do this by producing a range of blogs, vlogs and free online courses. But I also run some slightly more in-depth courses, both face-to-face and online. You don't need any previous qualifications to learn with me, and there are a range of courses available. So once you've finished watching this video, why not head on over to my website? The details will be in the video description below. This particular video is looking at how offenders justify their offending behaviour. Whenever we decide to do something, we normally have a good reason for doing it. We might make a spur-of-the-moment decision about whether or not to do something, or it could be a long, well-planned-out decision. The same is true, though, for offending behaviour. There's usually a reason for a person to commit a crime, and that can vary depending on what type of crime that it is. As a general overall approach to criminal and deviant behaviour, two researchers called Sykes and Matzer developed Neutralization Theory in 1957. Sykes and Matzer say that all behaviour, whether social or deviant, is learned, and we learn that by the process of social interactions. They based their theory on Sutherland's theory of differential association. Sutherland suggested that criminal and deviant behaviours require a person to learn the techniques of committing the crimes, as well as the motives, drives, rationalisations and favourable attitude to breaking the law. Sykes and Matzer use this to develop neutralisation theory. Using several techniques of neutralisation, a person reduces the social controls that are around them. Neutralization theory suggests that all offending behaviour is justified by the individual, and that might come before or after the offending behaviour. These justifications or rationalisations are generally given in defensive court, and they are believed by the individual. Sykes and Matzer suggested that there are 5 different types of justifications or neutralisations. The first technique is denial of responsibility. This technique allows the offenders to use external factors to explain their offending behaviour. For example, unloving parents or any other factor that's beyond the control of the person committing the crime. When an offender uses this technique, they believe that they're helplessly propelled in the situation and they view themselves as more acted upon than acting out. The second neutralisation technique is denial of injury. This technique allows the person to feel that nobody was hurt or harmed during the offence. So that would include, for example, shoplifting, because it doesn't cause any physical harm towards another person. The third neutralisation technique is denial of the victim. In this technique, the person might still acknowledge that the offence has taken place and that a person may have actually been hurt or harmed during it, but they believe that the injury isn't wrong in light of the general circumstances that it came about. So in this technique, the injury that the offender inflicts is seen as being justified as a form of retaliation or punishment. Sykes and Matzer suggested that the offender sees himself as an avenger and the victim is the wrongdoing. So, for example, if there were attacks on homosexuals, it would be because of their sexual orientation, and as far as the offender is concerned, they deserve to be acted out on. The fourth neutralisation technique is condemnation of the condemners. And in that technique, the offender shifts the focus of attention away from their own behaviours to those who disapprove. For example, that individual might see or might believe that the police are corrupt, stupid and brutal. Teachers always show favouritism and parents always take it out on their children. In adopting that viewpoint, the wrongfulness of the offender's behaviour is more easily disguised or lost. The fifth and final neutralisation technique is appeal to the higher loyalties. Throughout that technique, the individuals are able to neutralise social controls by sacrificing the demands of the larger society for a smaller social group that they belong to. The offender might recognise the norms and laws of the society, but other norms and beliefs are seen as more important to him or her. There has been a lot of support for neutralisation theory. For example, Professor Topali used neutralisation theory to explain the behaviours of hardcore street offenders. And he said that guilt isn't an issue at all because their crimes are considered as not only acceptable, but attractive and desirable with long-term consequences that would justify the offending, such as protection of a friend or protection within a gang or group. Mitchell and Doctors also supported neutralisation theory and said that there was a significant correlation between techniques of neutralisation and different types of delinquency by young people. This is a very early proposal of how and why offenders justify their offending behaviour. And although there has been a lot of support for neutralisation theory, there have also been some critics. For example, Hershey said that it's not clear whether an offender justifies their behaviour before or after they've done it. And because of this, one researcher named Diane in 1999 said that if offenders use these neutralisation techniques after their criminal acts, then those neutralisations only describe the reactions that have occurred because of that offending. With that vague distinction, Diane stated that neutralisation theory loses some of its credibility as a theory. Others have argued that these techniques aren't clearly defined enough and can be fairly vague. So, for example, denial of injury and denial of the victim are too similar to be distinct categories. These neutralisation techniques don't help to define the differences between types of offences or how the offender's various backgrounds might affect those neutralisation techniques. Motivations for offending can vary a lot. For example, a drug user might steal to get money to feed their habit, and a murderer might kill in retaliation. It's a well-known fact that having close family members who have offended can influence offending. However, some corporate fraud is committed by those with no criminal family members. The justifications or reasons that these criminals use are likely to be very different from one another. I often speak to people who talk about offenders as being different to them in some way. They may say that the man or the offender who murdered should be punished because it's wrong to take another person's life. But these same people are quick to say that rapists should be shot or that paedophiles shouldn't live. Most parents that I speak to say that if somebody touched their child, that they'd kill the person who did it themselves. And while that's understandable, it's a little bit hypocritical. The only differences between a murderer on the street and those parents is a belief that they're doing the right thing for them at that time. Both have got justifications for acting out and killing a person. One of the main theories in offending behaviour is called moral disengagement, and that was proposed by Bandura. According to that viewpoint, some people disengage themselves from their own moral standards, such as not killing, if they find themselves in a position where they're likely to violate those standards. According to Bandura, there are 4 processes that play a role in that. The first process is Reconstructing Conduct, and that means portraying immoral action as though it's morally acceptable. For example, you might think that it's okay to torture a suspected terrorist because he has a plan to blow up a whole city, but it's unacceptable to torture a person to get money or to get some information out of them in other circumstances. The second process is displacing or diffusing responsibility. And that process works by distorting the normal relationship between cause and effect. So, for example, people might behave in ways that they'd normally strongly oppose if some legitimate authority tells them to do it, because they can then blame that authority and without blaming themselves for the action. A good example of this is the infamous experiment where people had to administer electric shocks to others when they were directed to by a researcher. The third process is disregarding or misrepresenting injurious consequences. So in other words, convincing yourself that there are no or minimal harmful consequences for your actions. So, for example, you might think, I'm not going to recycle these bottles because nobody else recycles theirs, and so the planet is harmed anyway. The fourth and final process is dehumanizing or blaming the victim. That is, disregarding the humanity of your victims. So, for example, if you believe that Somalians don't have the right to be here, it would be okay to deport them. Or that Jews are not real people and don't have the same rights as you, so it's okay to treat them with disrespect. It's important that you do understand that these processes work within people's own minds. They're used as a way to convince themselves that they're in the right and that when they feel very strongly about something that they need to act on. We're all capable of great acts of evil given the right set of circumstances. If a man was severely beaten by a gang of 3 men, then it's actual bodily harm and it's a crime. These men may be acting because they wanted to take money off the victim, or because that person who they're beating up has raped a woman. And it's only the righteousness of our own beliefs that makes one of those things less acceptable than the other. That finishes today's vlog then on how criminals justify their offending behaviour. I do hope that you've enjoyed it and that you've learned something. Leave me a like or comment and don't forget to subscribe for more videos. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.